This is the fourth and the last installment on the use of location services and GPS. Here we're going to use what we learned so far to enable two people to track each other's locations. Something like in ride shares, say Uber, when the waiting passenger and the driver can see each other's current location. Or it can be some safety feature of knowing the other person's location. What do we need to do this? First, we'll need to obtain current location and map it, something we know how to do since the intro lesson. Also, remember, as soon as info needs to be shared between phones, we need to use cloud storage, which was also already covered in a separate topic. Knowing all that, the biggest challenge is going to be how to decide who, out of two people, is going to be person A and who person B, as there will be two sets of location data. We will assign A and B according to who is the first to access the cloud, and we'll see how in a moment. Now, let's take a first look at the designer space. Which components do we need? At the top, we place two switches. The first one for us to share our location, and the second one came from questions on previous GPS examples, where requests were placed on forcing the use of GPS instead of letting the Android to decide whether to use the networks instead. So we included the option to force the use of GPS. Below, in the 2x2 table, there are labels for the other person's coordinates and the text boxes underneath to display them. Lastly, we added a map and a marker to show that position on the map. Out of non-visible components, we added the location sensor and the CouldDB component for storage. Let's now see how the code is put together in the blocks editor. So, as usually, we're going to start by defining the variables, right? We're going to start first with defining a list of locations, and this is going to be our main set of parameters. This is the person A coordinates on the top, person B coordinates at the bottom. It starts with whether this person wants to share a location, so this is true or false, and followed index 2 is the latitude, index 3 is the longitude, and then the same for the second person, right, which we call person B. Then we need to define latitude and longitude pairs. The ones we call share, these are ours to share, and then the ones we call map, these are ours to map. So these are latitude and longitude of that other person that we want to map. Also, we're defining the indices for us, for index for sharing, and then there's an index for the other person to map. And these indices define whether we are person A or B, or vice versa for the other person, right? By this index, we're going to define where are we. Are we first on the list, these first three spots, or the second three spots on the list? So, as I already said, the most important part is to define this, whether we are person A or B. And we have to define it like right when the app starts or when the screen initializes. We cannot assume that this is actually going to be empty on the cloud as stored. So we have to assume it has some values. We don't know what they are, right? So, and this is what we use to actually define and find out whether we're going to be A and B person, right? So when the screen initializes, this is our first step. We want to be able to define this. Before that, we define the time interval for the location sensor. This is arbitrary. You can skip it. You can play with it how often you want the location sensor to be updated. We turn off the map because there's nothing to show, so we're not showing a map initially. And then we're calling the cloud, and we're getting this set of parameters of locations, this list that has 6 items, right? And remember, they're stored as dictionaries. So dictionaries have a label, right? a label is locations, and then it has value or tag. Tag is locations, and then it has value, and value is this list that has 6 items. And we call them global locations, right? So we make this call, we wait for the data to arrive from the cloud so that we obtain the data, and as soon as we get this value that we're calling for, right, we need to examine this and decide whether we're person A or B. So the way we do this, we look at the index 2. So index 2 is going to be a latitude, right? The index 1 is going to be true or false. So if the index 2 has 0, we assume that that space is free, right? So that the person A spot is free, and we're going to define us as being person A. So we're setting that our index, share index, is 2, and the other person is going to be 5, and then at the same time we're sharing or not sharing, we're picking up whatever is our switch here, true or false, and placing it at index 1 since we're person A. If this is not 0, latitude at the top, then we assume that we're going to be person B. So we just invert this whole thing that we just did. We now assume index 5, and then the other person is going to be on top like person A, and our share button is going to be now under the index 4, right? And to make sure that if we're assuming person B, we want to make sure that the other person actually is going to be writing position as person A. So we're also reinforcing that by writing 0 at the index 2. So when the other person examines index 2, it's going to find 0 and it's going to assume position of a person A. Once we do that, we also update the data on the cloud under locations under this change, assume this changed values that we just assigned, and we also set our variable global locations at our current value that we figured out right here. Okay, after this point when we decided who's person A and who's person B, and we have these indices that define that, most of the other stuff we've seen already. The only thing that's different here and new is this business of forcing the use of GPS. So here, when this GPS switch changed, we're checking whether the GPS is switched to true, so whether we want to force the use of GPS. If that's true, we're basically setting the provider name to GPS and locking it, right, to GPS. That way we ensure the use of GPS. If it's not set to true, then we're basically gonna unlock it and let the Android decide whether to use GPS or the networks. Okay, the next thing is whenever our location changes, we want to be updating the values on the cloud, right? So when our location sensor senses the change of a location, or simply there is a time interval, right, that it updates, when there are new coordinates that are obtained from the GPS or from location services, right, we want to update those values on the cloud. So we start by checking whether the global index share is not 0. If it's not 0, it means that we are already assigned as person A or B. So index is either 2 or 5, right, as we've just shown. So if this is true, it means we already decided which position we are, and then we're going to be updating the values for the latitude, longitude, and also we're checking again the switch whether we're sharing or not, right? So basically we're going to be assigning this new latitude, longitude, and this switch for share to the indices of the position A or position B, depending what is our global index share right here. Okay, so when we do this, then we want to update these values on the cloud, and we're calling the cloud to store value. We're storing or replacing, right, updating the set of values, that list of 6 items, with the updated global locations right here. So this is how we update data on our side on the cloud. And the very last step is whenever the data changes, whenever data gets updated in the cloud, we want to basically pick new data and be able to map it if that other person shares that location, right? So when the cloud data changed, this change can be our change that we update the cloud, or it can be changed on the other person when the other person updates the cloud. So it doesn't really matter. What we do though, we basically get the new updated set of data, which is under values for our tag, which is locations, right? This is tag and these are values, a list of 6 items. And then we have to check first whether this other person switch is set to share, whether this position in the list of 6 is true. If it's true, we proceed and we're going to be basically updating the location on the map. If this is false, if this other person doesn't share the location, then there's no point going through this because we won't be displaying other person's location on the map. But let's say it is, right? So what do we do then? If it is, we need to pick up the current latitude and longitude of that other person in the map from the cloud. So this is right here. We're picking up the latitude to map, longitude to map right here from the list of 6 items. We're basically displaying right here that latitude and longitude right in the text fields under the labels for the latitude and longitude. And then finally we're going to be displaying position on the map. So we're turning the map to visible, and then we center the map to the current latitude and longitude of that other person, setting the zoom level as we talked before. Zoom level is really up to you to decide how zoomed in or not you want to be, so something to experiment and figure out what works best for you. And then finally we want to set that marker to the same current position, right, of the other person. So we're going to basically assign the marker position to latitude and longitude. And this is pretty much it for the code, everything that we need to do to get this app to work. At the end of each example, we demonstrate how the code executes. However, this is the first case where we cannot truly demonstrate it, as it requires 2 people at 2 different locations. Instead, we'll do what we can, just a simple illustration, as if we read the other person's location. To do this, we'll have to clear the locations tag on CouldDB, cloud storage, and force this code to use the initialized coordinates. That's why we're going to pretend as if the other person is, say, person B, and we're going to switch his boolean to true and assign some coordinates right to it. So let's say we're going to assign some New York City coordinates for the person B. So right here we switch to true, and then we're going to assign, this is the latitude and then the longitude for the New York City. And then to clear cloud storage, whatever is already stored under the locations, we're going to quickly add a button that we're going to use basically for this purpose, right? So here we're going to just add this button, and then we're going to assign the action, right, for this button. So let's say we can do this right here, and the button is right there. When the button is clicked, right, we want to clear the storage. So the action that we're looking for here is clear, right? So we're going to do this, and the tag is locations. So we're just going to copy this tag here. So now when we click the button, we're going to clear whatever was stored on the cloud, and we're going to basically force our code, right, to use this assigned initialized coordinates. And this is now playing a role of that other person's coordinates, right? As if this person is in the New York City. So, as usual, we're connected to a phone through the AI companion right here, and the phone is directly mirrored on the laptop screen, right, as we see. So when we start this code, right, what we did here, nothing happens initially because obviously there is no that other person. Also notice here that we can make this switch, right, whether we share location and whether we want to force the use of GPS, right? This is on our side. These are the latitude and longitude of the other person that we need to obtain. And we're going to just write what we assign here. To do that, we need to press the button, which I'm going to do right now. And then basically this is going to delete everything that was already stored. And we're going to refresh our companion screen. So now it is going to pick up these locations as if this was the person B. And we see we're getting this latitude 40.71, longitude, and here's the map with the marker, and you can also see we're the other person is right next to the Brooklyn Bridge. Okay, so this was a very rudimentary demonstration because we cannot fully demonstrate this code, but